great. We are live, right? Okay, great. It's exactly 11 at Unum Radio today, and this is Activated Talks podcast. Today we have a very special guest in house. I don't want to be the person to break the news. I'll just gladly give him the opportunity to kindly introduce himself.
I'm a guest, and as your guest, I think you'd do much more better.
Okay.
I don't know how to put it in good words, but it would be best to introduce your guest to the listeners so that your listeners are not caught by surprise. I mean, some might want to switch off their radio, some might want to turn off the volume, so at least let's give them that opportunity of deciding to say, hey, do I switch off my radio? Okay. Do I turn up the volume? Do I invite a friend or something of that sort?
All right. Okay, so with that being said, I would just introduce our guest. Today we have the People's General, as we all know who the People's General in this country is. We have Saddam Amushelelo in the studio today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take your pen if possible. We want to have in-depth understanding of a certain topic which we bring today, leaning towards unemployment and the reduction of civil servant, as well as the increasement of that particular topic. Martin?
Yes, very good morning. Good morning to our viewers. Yes, welcome back to the Activated Talks podcast. This is the first episode for this year with an invited guest, so we would like to welcome you back. Do share the platform, do drop your comments in the comment section. Take a notebook because we have a very interesting guest today, the People's General, Mr. Saddam Amushelelo.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for the invite. I know it was short notice, but I decided, regardless of the short notice, to say that I'll avail myself so that we can be able to discuss. And then just basically, sometimes, when people just see you when you're doing a particular thing, they obviously do not understand the context in which you're doing it. And obviously, sometimes you are misconstrued to say that, why is this guy doing things this way? So today we can perhaps clarify and then just make people have a better understanding as to why we are pushing things and why things need to be done in a particular way, in a certain way. Exactly. But obviously you guys know better where this conversation is going to go. Obviously I'm just here to answer questions and then obviously answer them to the best of my ability and the best of my knowledge. And then, let's have a great show. It's a podcast.
Exactly.
Podcast, I understand now, it's the future for a lot of things. So this is basically where information is going to be shared. A lot of people no longer read books, so podcast is like the new learning platform.
Exactly.
If you want to learn something, you switch on a podcast. If you want to learn about finance, economics, history, there are so many podcasts on so many issues. So podcast is becoming like sort of the new books that we're reading, because we're growing up now in an era where we've got visuals and audio. And some people obviously are not good at reading books, but they like to see things and they like to hear things. And learning has many forms. You can learn from a book, you can learn from experience, you can learn from hearing, you can learn from seeing. So there are so many forms of learning that the world has revolved in. In the future, I'm sure that when you go to a lecture and you are being taught in school, wherever it is, universities, I'm sure it's now going to be a podcast on a particular subject of maths or science or whatever the case is. And I think learning should be fun, because the moment something is fun, it obviously grabs your interest.
Exactly.
And when something is not fun, there's no interest in that. So I think that we should make this podcast as fun as possible, so that as many people can be able to learn from this fun that we're going to have. So, gentlemen, feel free to ask whatever type of questions you want to ask. Don't feel intimidated by the fact that you hear the name General. It's the People's General. It's not.
Exactly.
I'm not against the people. So please be open. Let's have a great show. Let the listeners at the end of the day and the viewers have content that they can really say that this was worthwhile. This was worth spending 30 minutes or an hour listening to. Because part of the problem that I see sometimes is that you would spend an hour hoping to find something of value just to realize that you wasted your whole hour listening to some gibberish guys talking, and they're not even making sense of what they need to say, and you're like, okay, did I really just waste an hour of my whole entire life that I'm never going to get back on something that didn't even educate me or enlighten me or anything of that sort?
Wow, exactly. Before we even had to get started, we're already starting to learn about the importance of having a podcast. So with that being said, I wanted to quickly touch on what this podcast is about. The podcast is mostly tailored to change the mentality within the society of Namibia, more specifically to the youth, to change the perception in regards to the news or the current affairs which are happening within our country. So with that being said, I just want to ask you, the people's general, as this community refers to you, perhaps maybe you can give us just a detailed description of what you do as the people's general, because it might be that we assume this is what is happening, but some other people out there might not know what exactly it is your agendas are.
I mean, as you've asked the question to say, what is it that I do? I'm simply just a concerned Namibian. And I'm simply just an ordinary Namibian, just like any other Namibian, who simply realized to say that something must be done. Someone must stand up. You know, I always used to be also on the other side, where you would like just comment and say like, why is who not doing something? Why is somebody not intervening in this matter? And eventually you realize that, why can that someone not be you? I mean, what I'm fighting for is I'm basically fighting for a just society. Now, what is a just society? A just society is basically a society where whether I'm the president or whether you're just a son of a commoner, which is most probably a farmer, a peasant, or whatever the case is, we are all equal at the end of the day. And what is it by equality that I mean? That simply means that if me as the president, there is a state hospital, and my people use that state hospital, I should also be using that very same hospital. Because if I can't trust the doctors in that hospital and the service that is being delivered in that hospital, why should the people who entrusted me to be their leader also go to that particular hospital? So it's all about us realizing to say that if you, for example, are a minister and you become sick, then if there is a queue at Katutura Hospital, you should also just go and queue up.
Exactly.
Why should you all of a sudden have access to a private doctor when you were elected to be a representative of the people? Now, what I'm trying to make people realize is to say that these people that we elect to become our leaders, they are not our bosses. They are supposed to be our servants. That's why it's called public servant. You are there to serve who? Perhaps people don't understand the word, the terminology servant. Servant simply means that you are almost like a maid. You are there to serve your leader. Now, who's your leader? Your leader then becomes the people. The people basically just chose you to say that we feel that you are the right person that will be able to give our dreams and our aspirations the drive and the vision that we want. And we are now simply putting you there so that you can drive this country called Namibia. Let's refer Namibia to as a car. Namibia is sort of a car, and we basically give this car to someone to drive it because we can't all be drivers. Imagine you are the one here, the gearbox, changing gears. I'm the one indicating. This one is turning. So you are indicating to the left, but me, I'm turning to the right. What do you think we're going to do? We're going to cause accidents.
Exactly.
So there must be one person who's then responsible for this whole country called Namibia. And that is why then we obviously elect our leaders so that they can be in charge of the system. So now what we're simply saying is that we want to remind these people that we have elected to say that, listen here, we have given you a mandate. And that mandate is to go and make sure that you are able to please everyone. And if you are not able to please everyone, then you must make sure that you work hard so that at least 70 to 80% of the people are pleased. And that is why we're saying that if we don't have a just society where we're all treated equally, then unfortunately we are always going to have this thing of each stepping on each other's toes, because you do something, nothing happens to you. I do something, something happens to me. Now, obviously, I'm going to start having a grudge against you. I'm going to start having a sort of resentment to say that, but is this guy more special than I am? Because at the end of the day, when you go to the toilet, you do the same thing I do. When you go to sleep, you do the same thing I do.
Exactly.
So we are all human beings at the end of the day. And what we're simply trying to say is that we must have people who are compassionate with others. We must have people who obviously have an understanding of where people come from and where people obviously have aspirations of wanting to. And that is merely what I'm trying to do here. And what the other thing that is key, I'm basically trying to make the blind see. They say in the kingdom of the blind, he with one eye becomes king. Now me with my one eye, I'm now saying, but wait, why can't I just wake the others up? So that when the people wake up, they then start to realize to say, but wait, these people are here eating in front of us. Because remember, when people are asleep, you are unable to see what others are doing because you are blind.
Exactly.
So the guys are here busy passing each other money. They are busy here selling your diamonds at a cheap price. They are busy here selling your uranium at a cheap price. They are busy here selling your lithium at cheap prices. But because you are blind, you are unable to see these things. So what I'm simply doing is, I'm like Dr. Helena Ndume, who is basically one of the world-renowned surgeons, who basically, she operates you and then you start to see. That's what I want to do. I want people to see the reality. I want people to wake up from the illusion that our current government is a caring government, yet your people are living in shacks.
Yes.
You cannot tell me that you love your people, yet your people are drinking dirty water. You cannot tell me that you love your people, yet your people do not have access to water. You cannot tell me that you love your people, yet you are building a building almost costing $1 billion next to a hospital that was built by an apartheid government, and now that building is literally falling apart. So we must be able to tell our people the harsh reality. And guess what? Mental slavery is real. Mental oppression is real. Now, what is this mental slavery? Mental slavery is basically when you brainwash people into believing that you are the only one who has the abilities and capabilities of running a country. Now, the current government has painted them to sort of be like gods, to say that we are the only ones with solutions. We are the only ones who are able to run a country. But guess what? This country is failing. And Namibia is down the line. Every day we see how the railways are falling apart. Go and look at hospitals. They're falling apart. Go and look at schools. Everything is literally falling apart. The only thing that they are able to maintain, and the only thing that has been well maintained for the last 33 years of this country, is their fat bellies. That's the only thing that has been well maintained.
All right.
No, honestly.
Yeah.
Those fat bellies have not changed.
Yes, that's true.
They've remained the same. Everything else is collapsing. Young people are graduating on a daily basis.
Yes.
Where are they graduating to? Into the streets.
Exactly.
We are introducing new curriculums where we are sending over 30,000 young people into the streets. Now, have we ever done research to say that this students that we sent last year into the streets, where are they today? They've become part of the statistics of this high unemployment things that we are now talking about. But all I'm saying is that I'm the guy who basically simply wants to become the guy who shed light, and with that light, perhaps those who are in darkness are then able to see what is actually happening.
Yes. Wow. You have pointed out some really obvious stuff.
Exactly.
You know, but it's not obvious in the sense that a lot of people are not noticing them. For example, how our leaders, so-called leaders, are disconnected from the public. You know, in a sense that they are not aware of what is actually happening in the public sphere. You know, in reality, for example, they don't use the public hospitals. They don't go drive around, for example, in the rural areas just to see what exactly is happening. And then also the kind of ignorance of the youth or the young people and the people in general, or Namibians in general, when it comes to noticing their rights. For example, just versing themselves with the constitution and understanding what rights are attributed to them and exercising these rights. For example, the right to express yourself, to criticize the government, and so it brings me to a question: where do you get the courage that you have to actually stand up for these things, and speak up? And how can young people also get the same courage to stand up for their rights, criticize the government, etc.?
Now, this is one thing you need to understand. The whole systems were designed on fear. Now, let's take an example of religion. In religion, they say that if you don't obey, you will go and burn in hell. If you don't worship me and me only as your only God, what do? You go and burn in hell. Now, then we come to government. Government does the same thing. If you don't follow rules or orders or whatever these things, what do? We put you in prison. Then you come to school. School is always there. If you don't do this, you fail. So the whole system is built on fear. Now, you as a child, when you're growing up, your parents would always threaten you with what? We'll go and call the police. So you grow up as a child with the fear of the police. Because as a child, whenever you were starting to cry, police, I'll call the police. Then you as a child, because you heard that the police are like sort of bad people, and there are these people who come and catch people and put them in prison, you now become fearful.
I can relate.
Now, you understand this fear that you have now grown up with. It sticks to you as an adult. That is why a lot of people, they can't confront governments, they can't confront anyone, because there's all this fear that has been instilled in us. And then it also comes down to our culture. Our culture is one way, apparently, we should not question. You see, your parents, you're never allowed to question them. To say, why daddy? Why mommy? Why this? It's apparently terrible to question. So now, you obviously know that you cannot question authority. So if you from your household, you are taught not to question authority, do you honestly think you'll be able to stand up and say, Mr. President, this that you are doing is wrong. Minister, this that you are doing is wrong. Councillor, this that you are doing is wrong. You won't do it because already, as you are growing up and as you are groomed to be fearful of the system.
Yes.
Now, for as long as people are afraid of the system, no one is ever going to have the courage of obviously questioning the system, standing up to the system, and obviously be able to fight the system. Now, here's the thing. The other thing that keeps many of the people too scared to even ask questions is the fear of death. Because apparently the government is powerful, you can't go against the state, these are powerful individuals and all of these things, you are going to die. Now my question is, the day I was born, the only thing I was guaranteed after my birth is death. You were born to die. So when you make peace with that fact that you were born to die, then you are going to be liberated. You're no longer going to have that fear of death. Because many of us fear death. And just to express how much people fear death, I'm going to tell you a story. So there was a church, and the pastor was busy preaching in the church. And the pastor, most, he likes to call himself the man of God or the child of God. In fact, he likes to call himself the child of God and all of that. Now, as he's there preaching, I'm the child of God, I'm the child of God, rebels then come in. And then as the rebels come in, they then obviously come to the pastor and then they say, we are here to shoot you so that you can go to your father God. And then the pastor says, no, my father is Petru Shanika. Even the pastor is scared to die. But these are the very same people who preach every day to us to say that you must die in order for you to go to the kingdom of heaven or wherever it is.
Yes.
Now, this is one thing that we also need to start to do as Africans. We must start to decolonize some of the things we were colonized with. Now, when the Europeans came to Africa, they only came with two things. They came with the Bible and they came with a gun. Those who did not want to read the Bible, they were shot dead. Those who read the Bible were obviously taught how to pray. Now, how do you pray? What are you taught when you are saying to pray as a child? You are told to close your eyes, right?
Exactly.
Now, why did they ask us to close our eyes? They asked us to close our eyes, and then as soon as we were done praying, they had taken all of our land, they had taken all of our women, and they had taken all of our resources by the time we opened our eyes. And that is how colonialization started in Africa. Now, I always ask Africans, what did we worship before the white men came and introduced the Bible to us? Now, obviously, the biblical people are obviously going to be like, ooh, this guy, what is he now trying to come and do here? But the problem with most of our people, we've been brainwashed to a point where now we have become proper slaves, that the person who is oppressing you, you are even defending his methods of oppression. Now, let's look at this so-called people who came to teach us the Bible. They taught us how to pray. Now, why did they teach us the Bible? Because they wanted us to be good slaves.
Let's see.
Slaves who obey who? The master. Because what does the Bible teaches us? It teaches you that if I slap you on this side, you must offer me the other what? The other cheek. If I slap you and I ask for your forgiveness, you must do what? You must forgive me. Now, it is very funny that black people are the only people who have forgiven their atrocities that have been committed against them. Now, I want us to draw a scenario of the Jews. Do you guys know of the Jewish Holocaust?
Yes.
Have you heard of it? Have you read of it? This was when Hitler had basically ordered the killing of Jews. Now, guess what the Jews did after the Holocaust? They didn't forgive the Nazis. They went after every single Nazi and they killed those Nazis. Now, what did we black people do to the people who raped us, who robbed us, who killed us, who enslaved us? We simply did what? We forgave them. That is why today Africa, as much as we want to make noise, most of Africa is still in the control of the West. Now, this is something interesting that I want to tell most of us. Did you guys know that apart from a very few countries, many of the countries who gained their independence, it was not through the bullet. Ghana did not gain its independence through the bullet. And that was the first African country to gain its independence. Do you guys know that?
Yes. Negotiations.
It was negotiations. So what did the white people do? The white people looked for black puppets. These were black people who could be put up as a face. These were black people who could be controlled by white people. And then they said, you guys are now taking over government. But guess what? We are still keeping the means of production, which is the land, the economy, and everything else. And that is what they simply did. So what we did was we just changed faces. But the system still remained the same. The laws did not change. The court systems did not change. The economic systems did not change. Nothing changed. That's why you still find that majority of the blacks in Africa still remain what? In poverty. And why is that? It's because there was never true independence.
Most definitely. I think that's a very informative, let me say, a story that you have told. I think the thing that most people don't understand is that as an individual, living a very deliberate life is what allows you to accommodate change as well. So at this point, I think we want to understand in terms of living in a just society. We all aware of the unemployment rate in this country, and we have seen that you.
Bookworm. There are some people who are talented with their hands. Then guess what? What we did at 1990 when we gained our independence, we did away with that system, and then we just went with academics, strictly academics. Now guess what? You, for example, you are talented in singing, but now you are forced to read about locust, you are forced to read about velocity and all these things, but you're not interested in velocity. You are interested in vocals. You are interested in melody. That's your interest.
Exactly.
But because you are not taught that in school, what happens? You are there forced to read things that you don't have an interest in. Because remember, as human beings, we're all unique. We're all given our talents. We're all given our gifts. But now, because the system doesn't nurture gifts, the system only wants people who are going to be yes men and yes women. Because remember, part of the education system is to train you so that one day you become a good employee.
Definitely.
Remember, that's why, what time does school start? 7 o'clock.
Some 7:30.
7 o'clock,
Yeah.
7:30. Now, why do you think it's so? You're already from a child being trained how to go to work early in the morning. That's why now work starts at 8 or 8:30. So at least now when you become an adult, you can have that hour to go drop your child off at school, because you're obviously going to have a child.
Yeah.
You drop them off at 7:30 and then you rush to go to be at work by 8 o'clock. Now, that is how the system then started. Then we started introducing this thing to say that if you fail grade 10, you get chucked out onto the street. How many people started failing grade 10 and we started sending those children into the streets? Now count, let's say maybe from 1995. How many grade 10s have we sent into the streets?
Yes.
Where are those grade 10s today?
Yes. Just to interrupt you a little bit.
Yeah.
The presidential spokesperson or press secretary, Mr. Ngari, yesterday, he gave a very ridiculous comment. I find it very ridiculous. He said, the reason why we have a lot of unemployed people is because these people dropped out of school. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
There is something coming from the press secretary, the president's press secretary. It's
So,
ridiculous.
so that just tells you to say that that is the line of thinking that is coming from the people who are in charge of the system. And this is what people need to understand. The system wants you to be poor. Because when you're poor, it's easy for you to be oppressed. You cannot oppress the rich. Why is that so? The rich have money. Money is power. If I have access to lawyers, that means that I can sue you. I can sue the government or I can sue whoever. But if you are poor and I oppress you or I do something to you today, I can slap you right now. Guess what? You're going to go open a case. Guess what I'll do? I'll go to that police officer, pay him a certain amount for that docket to disappear. If that docket happens to go to court, I go and pay the prosecutor to say that, chill, don't prosecute on that case. If the prosecutor fails, I pay the magistrate. If the magistrate fails, we pay the judge. That is unfortunately how the system wants people to be. Now, why also do the people want you to be poor? Because the poor can be easily fooled. The poor you can make promises to. Now, look at where our campaigns usually take place. They don't take place in Kleiner Cooper. They don't take place in academia. They sure as hell won't take place in Ausblick. Because guess what? What are you coming to tell me?
Yeah.
I've got 3 toilets in my house. Are you coming to promise me toilets? Are you coming to promise me good roads? Are you coming to promise me water? Are you coming to promise me electricity? I'm a director of a company, or maybe I own a company because I've got fishing quarters or I've got diamond license or whatsoever. So the poor are the people that you need to keep oppressed so that every 5 years you go there and say, we'll come and build toilets for you. Because right now they are busy using plastics in the middle of the night to relieve themselves.
Wow.
They are either using bushes to relieve themselves. They need water. They need electricity. They need proper houses. They need proper sanitations. So who can you then easily go and,
Not many. Not a,
Quite a very low number of course.
unless they are a minister? Those are the only white people you usually see at those events.
Yeah.
Now, why are the whites not interested in celebrating independence? Is it because they're not Namibian, or is it because it's not a day for all of us, or what is the exact point? It's because these guys have farms. These guys have businesses. Do you honestly think I'll go and sit the whole day in the sun to get a bretchen and a small cool drink as a token of appreciation to listen to someone speaking long, useless speeches the whole day? I'm obviously going to spend that day doing something better, productive. I'll most probably be on my farm, which is 11,000 hectares, which is about 11,000 football fields. And this farm, obviously, I did not buy it because my great-grandfather stole it from the German and from the Herreros or from the Namas when they massacred us or something of that sort. So these are some of the problems that need to be addressed before we are able to do anything. But coming to answer your question is to say that why this particular date? Now, this is one thing, and I like to educate so that we educate ourselves. Namibia never gained its independence. Remember, SWAPO did not come marching into Namibia with cannons, with bazookas, with guns, and white people did not run out of Namibia. White people transferred power to the blacks. You know what transfer means? I'm giving it to you. You didn't take the power. Now, this is what people need to understand. Power is not given. It is taken. That is why today we are not in charge of this country. Now, what happened in 1989, 5 countries came together and then they negotiated our country's independence. Now, in those negotiations, they drafted our constitutions. And in our constitution, they made sure to say that whatever properties were stolen or illegitimately gotten by the white people, they have the right to now keep it. They basically legitimized the theft of our land and our resources.
Wow.
And then they said there were 3 things on the table in these negotiations. One was political freedom, the other was the land, and the other one was the economy. Guess what our black leaders chose? They only chose political freedom. So that they can be what? So that they can be called His Excellency, Your Honorable, Your Worship. So that they can now be able to live in the State House, drive nice black Mercedes, and live in government houses, and obviously occupy government positions. And what happened to the rest of the Namibians? That is why you see a lot of black people go now to any informal settlement. Who do you find their majority?
It's black people.
Who owns the economy?
Wow.
The white people. Now, if I own the economy, why do I own the economy? It's because I have the land. Remember, when I have the land, I can take this land to the bank and give it as collateral. You as a child from Havana, living in a so-called illegal settlement, your mother cannot take that piece of land where you are living and go to the bank and say, "Bank, can we give you this piece of plot that we have here in Havana and you keep it as collateral so that you can give me a loan because I want to give my son money so that he can buy equipment to start his own podcast so that he can be like McG, Rogan, what was the Joe Rogan and all these guys making big bucks from doing podcasts." Your mom can't be able to do that because she doesn't own that piece of land. So what I'm simply saying is that this independence is a false independence. And for as long as we do not fix this falsehood that we're currently living in, the mess is still going to continue happening. Now, we need to understand that we need to start having the conversation on how we can safely redistribute the land and the resources of this country. Now, why is land so important? Even if you are a religious person, you can't build a church in the sky. Is it possible?
Not at all.
You can't build a hospital in the sky. Is it possible? You need to build it where? On the land. If you want to grow food, where do you grow it?
On the land.
If you want to mine minerals, where do you find them?
Land.
Now, do you see how important the land is?
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Land reform has been one of the crucial things that has been delayed by government for over 33 years. They are very slow at it, at coming up with policies to, safely and peacefully redistribute land, to the people. What what possible solution or what better approach do you think can be taken in this regard without causing violence, and instability?
Now, here's the thing. Like I said before, remember when our independence was negotiated? We promised these guys that we are going to protect the minority. You know what minority is? It's the little group.
Yeah.
We are going to protect them by any means necessary. That simply means that whatever properties they have, it's going to be theirs and it's going to belong to them. Now, this is what Namibians need to understand. 70% of our land is owned by 4,000 white farmers.
Wow.
Listen to me again. 70% of our land is owned by 4,000 white farmers or white people. Let me not call them farmers because most of them are not farming. They just have this land for status. It's like their holiday houses. They just go there when Windhoek life or the city life becomes a bit challenging, then they go there for a breather. Now, you cannot have 4,000 people owning 70% of your land. And that is why blacks who make up 95% or 96% of the population don't have access to land. So we're not saying that we hate white people, but all we're saying is that land is a God-given natural resource. If I put a gun now to your head and I say, my brother, go to the toilet and I want you to shit land for me. Sorry for using that word. Or I want you to excrete land. You won't be able to excrete land. Is that not so?
That's so.
So then that simply means that this land that we now have, it must come and it must be in the custodian of the government. Now, why am I saying that this land must be in the custodian of government? Now, did you guys know there's that thing called the red line?
Yeah.
Now, all the land that is north of the red line is called communal land. Do you know what communal means?
Yeah.
It means for the community.
Yeah.
It's owned by the state. Now, why is that land owned by the state?
It has no value.
No, it's not about it has no value. It's because it's supposed to be shared equally amongst all of us. Now, south of the red line, what do we call it? It's called commercial. That's why you hear commercial farms, meaning that it's private property. Now, how can land be owned privately? Like do you produce land?
Not at all.
So why then do you want to own something that you don't have the ability to produce?
I see.
So all the land must belong to the state. And then what should the state then do? The state then says, if you want to use the land productively, let's say for example you want to start farming, then the government or the state then gives you the land, gives you let's say a 5-year agreement to say that if within 5 years we are seeing you are not using this land productively, we remove it from you and we give it to the next person. What does our current government do? Russian billionaires fly in here, they go to State House, after meeting the president in closed doors, the next day you hear the guy has gotten a 99-year lease on our land.
Ridiculous.
How do you give someone almost 100 years to own your land?
Yes.
That's like a century. So
yes.
this land question, for as long as Namibia as a country, we are not self-dependent, meaning that we are not able to produce our own electricity, we are not able to produce our own food, we are not able to manufacture things that we need for ourselves.
Yeah.
Even if we decide to take the land tomorrow, we are going to suffer the same fate as Zimbabwe suffered, because unfortunately, we are just going to be sanctioned.
Exactly.
What they will basically do is they'll say, from now on, the rest of the world don't do any business with Namibia. Namibia is now officially an enemy. But why? Simply because you just redistributed the land. You are just giving the land back to the rightful owners. And you are still allowing the guy who's not the rightful owner to also have a piece of it, because we understand the guy has been there now maybe for the last 100 years, ever since.
Exactly.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
I get
this protest is for everyone who understands that we cannot be in a country claiming to be celebrating independence, yet we still import electricity from South Africa, yet we still import food from South Africa, yet we are still dependent on South Africa. We are begging China for money. we're begging the West for money, we're literally begging for people to come and invest in our country, but apparently we are independent. So let those little resources, and this is what I always say, government always says there is no money. But for some reason, there's always money for Greek salads and these funny parties that they always want to host. But there's never money for the people. So it just tells you that the priorities of government are not the people, but it is for who? For themselves. Ministers are traveling outside the country every single day, left, right, and center. They are traveling up and down for nonsensical things. But there is no money apparently to start solving the unemployment crisis that we have in this country. Now, on the 21st of March, we're going to give government a blueprint. You see, I'm not talking about Jay-Z's album, but we're giving them a blueprint on how they can go about to create employment. So they must just come and take our petitions. If they fail to take our petitions, the following day, we are still going to be in the streets. So,
region already on board?
Valvesba is on board. Ketmazop is on board. Ocharongo is on board. Rundu is on board. Ohangwena is on board. Katima is trying to get on board. But so far, those guys are the ones who have confirmed that they are on board. Utapi, where the salad is going to be eaten, that is where the main action is going to happen. Here in Windhoek, it's just like a mini action, but the real action is going to be in Utapi. Now, I'll be leading the protest here in Windhoek. So we'll be gathering at Katutura Youth Center as from 7 o'clock in the morning. Now, what we're encouraging is, please bring along your CV. Please bring along water. If you've got a speaker, you know this boombox, bring along the speaker so that as we are marching, there's music, we are dancing to our music. If those of you have got cooler boxes, please bring along your cooler boxes so that we are able to also celebrate our independence as we are marching towards our economic emancipation in our lifetime. So that is basically what we're saying. Now, government obviously has the ability to change all of our lives. But right now, we're just not a priority to them. Now, why is it that we're also asking the president to intervene in this? Remember when we had COVID and we declared state of emergency? All of a sudden, we were able to get 8.1 billion from somewhere. And that 8.1 billion just disappeared. So what we're saying is, if to solve the unemployment crisis, we need 10 billion, 3 billion, 4 billion. Let that money come from somewhere. Declare this as a state of emergency so that the money can come the same way Corona came. Because if tomorrow we hear there's Corona, they will find 20 billion, they will find 30 billion. But now we have young people who do not have work, but all of a sudden we're saying there's no money for them.
Yes.
This is a massive crisis that needs to be resolved as soon as possible because this is a time-ticking bomb. If we learn anything from the Arab Spring, it was started as a result of many young people who were frustrated, who were unemployed, who were fed up with the system, and guess what? They took to the streets and they violently removed all those sitting presidents. We don't want to remove any sitting president yet, but they must not force us because at some time we are asking now nicely. But guess what? As your anger keeps growing, and as your frustration keeps growing, you are not going to ask nice anymore. Young people are simply going to march and storm into those offices and they are going to say, Chief, I'm grabbing a table, I'm grabbing a chair, I've started work now. Here's my ID, put me on the HR list, I want to start getting my pay. That's what you're going to start doing. By force, Chief, I'm now working here. I'm the chief mini administrator clerk. Chief, I'm now your co-host. Yes, that is what we are going to start doing. Yes, by fire, by force.